And how's it going, guys? Josh Olufemii here, live from LA, and welcome to Creative Week with Herman Huang on the Olufemii channel. Creative Week is a time when we step in every day for an entire week with one of my friends that's more creative and more talented than myself, and we cover a bunch of really awesome, cool topics. So who is my bro Herman, and what can you expect from this week? Herman, also known as Coffee Liquor on Instagram, is literally one of the coolest digital content creators that I know. I could literally just sit on his Instagram forever and just literally scroll down all of his content, which is a mix of photography, captivating VFX, travel edits, and a lot of other random stuff. This week he's committed to releasing one VFX tutorial a day on the channel, which is crazy. Today we're going to be discussing the melting pixel effect. But first, of course, we're going to talk about Envato Elements. If you're watching this video, you're probably a video editor, and Envato Elements is a video editor's dream. It's a subscription service that gives you unlimited downloads of the most incredible stock footage, like cloud and fog overlays, aerial footage, fire, lightning. They also have incredible VFX packs, Premiere and After Effects templates, sound effects, royalty-free music, and literally anything you could ever want as a video editor. Just by clicking the link below, you will automatically get a free first month. You'll see that coupon for the free first month at the very end after you've finished signing up. And that's it. I use Elements literally in some regard every day. Now I got 2 tickets, one for me and one for you, and we're gonna take a quick flight over to beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia. My brother seriously lives in one of the most picturesque regions on the planet. You can actually download the After Effects project file that Herman will be using in the description below for free. Herman Huang, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you for the sick introduction. Now, today we're gonna be learning how to do the melting pixel effect that you see right here. Now, this was inspired by a lot of photos that I saw online that were going around on Instagram or Pinterest, and basically these pixels would be melting out from people's glasses, or they'd be deconstructing their body, and it had this really interesting, surreal, glitchy feeling to it. And this effect is actually called pixel sorting. It's an effect that selectively orders pixels in rows and columns in a way that is, it might use the shadows or the highlights, and it gives this really glitchy feeling to it. And you may have seen it in a lot of sci-fi movies, Hollywood movies, things like Ghost in the Shell, etc., maybe in the title sequences. Now, this plugin is unfortunately not free. It's something that you need to pay for, but it is well worth the money because you can do so much with it. You can alter your images, you can do things for your title sequences, for that modern glitchy feel. So if that's the type of aesthetic that you like to use in your videos or whatever it may be, then you're going to definitely get your money's worth for it. And this is just like the tip of the iceberg on what I'm teaching you today on what you can do. Like, this is pixel sorting. This is like what we're doing today. So let's get into it, guys. Okay, so here we are in After Effects, and basically you're going to need to bring in your footage into a new composition. So in this case, I already have a footage where I loop something, but yours will just be kind of like a footage file like this, and you'll be basically dropping it into this new composition. In this case, I'm just gonna be throwing this one in because this is going to be the footage that I'm using. I've already looped it. And look at this, this is a footage of me looking really excited when Josh hit me up about doing these YouTube tutorials. And let's say that you wanna turn your footage into a still image. You can totally do this. All you have to do is freeze the frame. You just gotta right click, you hit time, and then freeze frame. That way, if you play it through, nothing happens because it is now a still image basically. So in this case, I'm just going to use the footage as it is, and this new comp, I'm just putting it in this tutorial folder, and you're gonna right click and we're gonna rename it to, let's just say main, because this is gonna be our main composition where we work with all the elements. Next, you're gonna bring in your graphic or your image basically that you're going to be pixel sorting. In this case, I'm using this photo with Instagram's kind of color scheme for their logo. Now for this graphic, you can use literally anything, just depends on your color scheme and what kind of tone that you're going for. Some people like to use ocean waves and have that blue teal feeling to it. But in this case, I used the colorful Instagram colors for their logo because that was the theme that I wanted to go for this particular loop. What I want to do is fill the frame by changing the scale over here. So what I did was I hit S to bring up the scale. So that's a shortcut for that. And then I basically just adjusted the value so that it's big enough so that it fits with the width. And then let's say that, I want to fill up the height as well. Then you can unlock this so that uniform scaling is off. And then you're going to adjust the vertical value like so. So that way it full screens to fit the comp. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna pre-comp this graphic that I'm choosing, this Instagram.jpg right now, by hitting the shortcut Control-Shift-C, and that's gonna bring up this. I'm gonna move all the attributes into the new composition. Now you don't have to necessarily do this, but because I'm gonna be applying some effects on it, I just wanna make sure that it's not going to distort or do anything funny because I stretched the image. So we'll call this Instagram graphic and just hit enter. And it is now pre-comped. What we're gonna do now is, depending on the actual graphic that you're using, Pixel Sorter may have some trouble grabbing onto some pixels for it to have that pixely feeling. In this case, one tip is that you'll be adding some noise so that there's more for the Pixel Sorter plugin to actually grab onto. And how you do that is by adding some fractal noise. Now I'm gonna click this layer to highlight it, and then I'm going to hit Control spacebar to bring up my effects console. And this is a free plugin that you can get from Video Copilot. And actually, Josh released a video that was featuring Nick that talks about 10 amazing After Effects plugins that you could use. This is actually one of them. Did I forget to mention that it's totally free? So you should totally check it out. So I'm gonna pull it up again. I'm going to basically search for the effect fractal noise right over here. Now the image of fractal noise is going to replace the graphic. So what you'll wanna do is set the blending mode over here to overlay. That way you see some of the fractal noise on top of the graphic that you have. Now, another way for you to add noise is simply by adding the noise effect itself, like this. And then you can adjust the value to something a little bit crunchier, like let's say 25. Like I said, it's really gonna depend on your image, and you can go back to adjust these values later when you try it with a pixel sorting plugin and see the results of that. But once you've applied these two effects, what you're gonna do is pre-comp it again, because if I were to play this through, you can actually see some movement with the noise. But we actually want it as a still image, just so it's a little bit easier on your computer. So we're gonna do that by Control-Shift-C. We're going to call it Instagram graphic noisy. This, it's still playing through, but we're gonna freeze this. As I mentioned earlier, what you have to do is just right click it, hit time, hit freeze frame, and now it's a still image. Now comes the fun part where we're gonna be starting to do the melting effect. And how we're gonna do this is by opening up a new comp, like this, and just make sure it matches the dimension of the composition. So in this case, I'm doing 1080 by 1350 because that's my composition dimension. I'm gonna call it melt layer, like this. Make sure that the duration is also appropriate. In this case, we're just doing like 18 seconds. That might be too much. We're going to go with 8 seconds. So we got 8 seconds on our timeline. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna right click, hit new. We're gonna make a new solid. Doesn't matter what color it is because we're gonna be adding some fractal noise to it. So let's just call it that to make things a little bit easier. So we're going to apply the fractal noise effect just like what we did before. And we're going to actually adjust the values this time. So we're going to keep the fractal type basic. We're going to have the noise type soft linear as well. And what we actually want is for it to have a high contrast. So the blacks are darker and the whites are brighter. And then we're going to set the brightness a little bit lower, kind of like that. So we're basically creating some texture here. And the complexity and everything should be okay. What we actually want to do is have this stretched vertically. And one way we can do that is by hitting the transform over here. We're going to uncheck uniform scaling. That means when you change the value of the scale, you can individually choose whether or not you want to adjust the width or the height. So in this case, we're going to set the width all the way down. We're going to set the height just a little bit higher. So your values don't have to be exactly the same as mine. If I want to adjust it to like, let's say 250 for now, just so it's a little bit of a nicer number. We'll do -30 for brightness. So it's easier if you do decide to copy my values. We'll set the width to 20, that's good. And then we'll set the height to 200. So we have this, just so it's a little bit easier for you to follow along. And this is still enough contrast for this to work. What you wanna do now is take this layer, you're gonna duplicate it twice by hitting the shortcut Control-D and D again. And with 2 layers, you're going to reposition them so they are sitting on top. So it's going to be 1 layer here and then 1 layer on top. And we'll get into what we're actually doing with this in a bit. But all you have to do is just take it and then drag it up top. Now, if you wanna make sure it doesn't shift around and that it actually aligns vertically while you are moving your layers, we're going to hit shift while we are dragging, and that way I'm actually moving my cursor left and right and it's not going to move because I already defined that I want to move it vertically, and it will do so. So we're going to do this. It's okay if it overlaps just a little bit by a few pixels. That's okay. And then we're going to take one of these layers and drag it over like that. So now, as you can see from the red outline, there are 3 stacked together, one on top of another. So now you're going to create a new null object. All you got to do is right click, new null object. Now this null object doesn't do anything, but it is going to define the position for these 3 layers. I'm basically going to animate them so that they're moving downwards. And how we're going to do this is we're just going to rename it to something like position, just so it's a little bit easier for you to follow along. And we are going to take these 3 fractal noise layers. We're going to parent it over to the position or the null object layer. And how we're going to do this is by highlighting those 3, take the pick whip over here. It could be any of them because they're all highlighted. And you're going to drag the pick whip over to the position layer, just like that. So now, as you can see over here, they're all parented to the position layer. Look at these 3 children over here called fractal noise. I wouldn't name my children fractal noise. So we're going to hit the P key as a shortcut for the position. You're going to hit the stopwatch so that we have a keyframe in the beginning, and this is your beginning position. And we're actually going to go all the way to the end over here and then start dragging the vertical position, the Y position, and we're gonna move it all the way down to about here so that it reveals the top layer. So that way, if I were to play this through from the very beginning, it's basically shifting downwards. So basically, these 3 layers are copying the movement that the parent is telling it to do. In this case, just moving downwards. So this is basically some texture for the melting animation. If you want to melt a little bit slower, of course, you can readjust the duration of your composition and then move these keyframes over, or this keyframe over at least. Or if you wanted to melt faster, you would just move this a little bit closer like this, and then it would move faster, but your animation would be a little bit shorter. So we're gonna go back to the project. We're gonna go to our main layer again. Actually, we're gonna move this melt layer over here so it's all in one neat little folder. Organization is totally key. Take the melt layer, put it on top like this. We're gonna create a new adjustment layer. So right click, hit new. We're gonna hit adjustment layer, just like that. And we're gonna call it Displacement Map. We're going to add a displacement map by searching it up over here, displacement map. And as a reminder, if you decide not to go with effects console, like what I'm doing right now, you can just search it up over here in the effects and presets panel, displacement map, and it shows up exactly the same way. So the displacement map layer, we're actually going to set the target to melt layer like this, because it's going to take the information from the melt layer. And what we're gonna do is hide the melt layer because this doesn't actually need to show up. We're using it to help this displacement map make a nice little melting effect, which you'll see in a second. So we're gonna set the value over here for the horizontal displacement and the vertical displacement to luminance. And we are going to shift the vertical displacement value down like this. Now, of course, the intensity is going to depend on your taste. Let's just go overboard. Let's just go to like, okay, maybe not that much. Let's go maybe 100, like this. So it looks even meltier. Now, depending how much of the area that you're going to be actually melting, let's say that in this case, I don't want it to really peek over from the top and the bottom. So very simple fix. You can pre-comp all these 3 layers, the displacement map, the melt layer that it is taking information from, and also the graphic layer, and then pre-comp it. We'll call it IG, okay, we'll call it, for continuity's sake, Instagram melting, like this. And then you can take what I did before by unclicking this so that you can only adjust the vertical and stretch it like this. And now the top and bottom are nice and filled. So this is your melting effect so far. We're going to add one more element to help make it look like it's melting by making a new adjustment layer. We're going to rename it to liquefy because that is the effect that we're applying to it. So we will apply the liquefy effect like this. And we're going to use this finger pushing icon over here. And this is the tool we'll be using. We can go into warp tool options so that you can define your brush size. And this check by kind of overlapping over here. So let's see if this is big enough. We'll make it even bigger, maybe like this. And we're basically going to aid the melting process by pushing downwards because we're having it melt down. I'm gonna push it down. So I'm just clicking, holding it down, and moving it down like so, vertically, because I want it to be melting vertically. This tool selected. And we're gonna animate this liquefying effect that you just applied. Just hit the stopwatch for distortion percentage, like this. So this is going to basically say, what is the percentage of the amount of effect that you just applied. So if you hit this layer and hit U, it'll show everything that is that has keyframes in it, basically, that you're animating. In this case, it's the distortion percentage. So you can see that this keyframe over here is 100%. I'm gonna move it all the way to the end because this is the ending effect that I actually want. And then we're gonna go to the beginning and I'm going to hit 0. So basically, if I scrub it through, it's going to melt downwards. Now, this may not be enough. So what you can do is duplicate it by hitting Control D. So you have 2 liquefying effects. So now that you applied these melting animations, I hope you're keeping up okay so far. I know there are quite a few steps, but I hope that you're also taking away a lot of quality information for you to use in future projects as well. But we are getting to the fun part now. We're going to apply the pixel sorting plugin. Now, before we continue, if you're liking the video so far, please check out my Instagram page @coffeeliquor, and you can see what I've been working on. Shoot me a DM if you want to chat, or if you got any questions as well, because I'd be more than happy to reply back. All right, let's continue. So you're gonna right click, we're gonna make a new adjustment layer, and we're gonna call it Pixel Sort for organization's sake. And we're gonna apply Pixel Sorter 2, which is the plugin that I was introducing earlier. Now, this could be a little bit intimidating at first. There's all these values that you can play around with, but the ones that we're actually going to be using is having it under Process, Effect, and then knowing what we actually want to affect first. So do we want it to affect the highlights first or the shadows first? Now, this is going to depend up to your taste and what the effect you want to basically achieve. But in this case, I know that using highlights is a little bit better for this graphic at least. I'm going to set the angle to 0 because right now it is 90 degrees, which is going to be, left to right, which is not what I want. If we hit 0, it's going to affect downwards. How we're going to know is by playing with the threshold. This is going to be the fun part. And as you can see, the pixels are melting. Now you're gonna have to play around with this value because depending on your graphic, it'll give you a different look. So in this case, around here is pretty good. So if I were to just RAM preview this, but as you can see, the individual pixels, it's looking pretty clean. Now this is looking a little compressed because I have the resolution set to 1/3. I'm just gonna go half for now so you get a clearer image. And if we play it back, this is kind of what it looks like. Looking pretty neat. And of course you can play around with the threshold to see how much more pixelated you want it to feel. And there's a lot of these other settings that you'll wanna play around with as well, such as the length of the pixels. So how long they're gonna be. Do you want it to be shorter? Do you want it to be longer? The block size you can define as well. So you can have fatter chunks of blocks. In this case, maybe we'll do like 2. So it's a little bit less thin width-wise. So we'll play it through to check it out. And this is looking pretty good. Look at that. Some really interesting melting pixels going downwards. A quick tip is that if you are worried about this defined line over here, you may not see it unless I play it through, but there's basically a line that's dropping down. It's kind of camouflaged with the whole pixel sorting effect, but let's say that you want to get rid of it. This is actually due to your melt layer over here with this very harsh edge. Alternatively, what you can do is take the layer, overlap it a little bit, and then add a mask. So you can feather the mask so that it blends a little bit better. So what I'm gonna do is highlight this layer, which is this one on top. I'm going to kind of draw a square over here. And then I'm gonna set the mode to subtract. And right now it's still a harsh line because I haven't done anything yet, but if I hit F, it's going to show the mask feather, and I'm going to feather this just a little bit. Let's say up to 100. Now, of course, you can still see through it. So what we can do is adjust the position and move it down, kind of like this. Now if I play it through, it's a little bit better. There's a bit of a white blur over here, but you really don't need to worry about it. And then you'll basically do the same thing with this layer as well. Of course, that means you'll have a shorter animation. So you could just duplicate it and stack another one on top, but that is totally up to you. Set to subtract, and there we go. This. Now in this case, why not? We'll do it for example's sake. I'm going to duplicate this top layer over here so that I have one right on top. I'm going to move it over so that it overlaps, and it's still parented to the position layer, so I don't need to worry about it not following the parent. Listen to your parents, guys. So when I close this and I want to go back to this animation, and if I play it through, as you can see, there's a less harsh line. Now here's an option for you to take a load off your computer. What you can do is actually pre-render this animation so that when you're further working with it, it's not going to be super slow because you'll have the RAM preview just like a bunch of times, and we don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit Control M to bring it into the render queue. I'm going to actually just set it to anything, it doesn't really matter. But if you have Adobe Media Encoder, you have a lot more render settings. So I'm going to output it to, say, melting pixels, do this VFX, and we'll make a folder called pre-render, and we'll call this melting pixel, save. Q in AME. This will bring up your media encoder if you have it installed already. And you can change it to whatever file format that you think is appropriate that won't lose too much quality. Even if it does lose a bit of quality, it's not that big of a deal. In this case, I'm just gonna do QuickTime, Apple ProRes 444 or 422 Lite. These are the ones that I like to use without losing too much quality. Hit OK, and then you're just going to render. Now in this case, I already pre-rendered one and I called it this, melting pixel asset.mp4. And if I play it through, this is what I got. Now this one looks different than the one that I was playing with earlier. This one's a little bit brighter. And that's because what you can do is have a harsher fractal noise. So you can set the contrast even higher, or you can apply a curves layer and then make it a lot more contrasty. You just have to play around with the settings to see what result looks the best to you. But once you bring it back into your project, just play it through to make sure that it looks okay. Damn, that's looking cool. Just take a moment to appreciate it. Now, if you want to loop this animation because you don't want it to last for just 7 seconds, all you have to do is take the footage, you're going to put it in a new comp. I'm just dragging it into this new comp icon. We're going to name this comp, let's say, loop at the end, same name. And we're going to set the duration a little bit longer. Let's say, I don't know, 22 seconds. So if I zoom out, we have more time to work with. Now we're gonna set the opacity here around halfway by hitting T to pull up the shortcut for opacity. Hit the stopwatch so that it's 100%. You're gonna go to the beginning and then you're gonna hit 0. So that way it fades in from black or from being transparent. So why I'm doing this is because I'm gonna duplicate this layer like so, and I'm gonna stagger it kind of like this, offset it so that when this layer is done playing over here, if I hit U to show the keyframes, this will reach 100% to replace the animation underneath basically. So you're gonna start seeing this top layer. And then because we have a longer fade or crossfade kind of effect, it looks imperceptible. And we're gonna do this a few times depending on how long you want the animation to be. Now, it wouldn't be good if you were to stagger it and offset it like so, because then you would have this moment where it is still fading from being transparent. So just make sure that you're overlapping the keyframes so that there won't be a moment like that. And we'll do this a few times. Boom, we're gonna say it lasts all the way to here. And of course, in the beginning, you wanna make sure there is something there as well. So we're gonna make one more duplication and we're going to put it kind of like this. Now we play it through. It looks like it is looping. Isn't that neat? So now you've made a looping melting pixel effect with the plugin Pixel Sorter, we're gonna go back to our main composition. What you can do is just move this out of the way. You can either hide the visibility or you can pre-comp it. As you can tell, I like pre-comping things just to keep things kind of neat, and call it Instagram melting pixel effect. Moving all the attributes to the new composition, and then we're gonna hit OK. Now you can either delete this because it is still in your project, or you can just turn off the visibility by hitting this eye icon over here on the left. And we've got this, because now we're gonna replace it with this melting pixel composition. So you've got your melting pixel loop, and you've got your image to work with, or in this case, looping footage. What you're gonna do next is you're going to make a new solid. We're gonna call it matte because we are going to use this solid as a matte layer, and we're going to basically hide this, so we see our image and know where we are going to cut out for the actual melting pixel effect to appear. Now, maybe that sounds a little bit wordy, so I'm gonna show you what I mean. We're gonna take the pen tool, and basically what's happening is I'm gonna first set it to full resolution so I can see what's going on. And we're going to have the melting pixel effect melt from my glasses. So I'm gonna take the pen tool, we're gonna zoom in. We're going to hit the matte layer to make sure that we are masking the matte layer. Even if it's invisible, you can still apply masks to it. And then I'm going to take the pen tool and start basically masking this area where I would like the effect to start happening. So starting from here, I want it to melt downwards. So I'll do that. Boom. Now, a trick to getting straight lines while you are masking is, like I said before, when you're positioning things, you hold Shift and then you hit your point, or you hold Shift and you move the position. It's the same when you're applying this pen tool as well for straight lines. So in this case, I'm going to go back to this layer over here. I'm going to hit V just to make sure that I can click on this keyframe without completing this entire mask. Because if I were to hit G and I were to click this keyframe, it would just complete the entire mask like this, which is not what I want. So I'm just going back to V. I'm gonna click this point, and then I'm going to hit G again. And then let's say I want it to melt, yeah, somewhere around here is okay. We're gonna hit Shift down all the way over here, and then we're gonna complete the mask by doing this. So this is one area that I'm going to have it affect the melting pixel. So maybe I'll readjust this a little bit like that, so it looks a little bit prettier. Boom, that is one side of my glasses. Now we're gonna make a new mask over here on the right side. And then close this off to now have two nice masks. So if I were to turn on this matte layer now that you've been adding two masks to, you can see that it is two white solid areas, I guess, that show where the melting will happen. Now this is looking beautiful. What you can do now is hide the visibility of this matte layer. You're going to highlight this melting pixel loop. You're going to hit the track matte over here, and you're going to actually go for alpha matte. And then when you hit that, nothing happens yet because we haven't turned the visibility of this layer. Once we do, you can see that whatever area that we masked earlier will show the melting pixel effect. So if I were to play this through, it's looking pretty clean. Now, some few things that you can help fix it up a little bit is if you believe that the mask is a little bit too harsh, go back to your matte layer, hit F, and then just mess around with the feather. In this case, I'll just do about 5 or maybe 3. Let's do that. So it's a little bit less harsh and is blended, looking a little bit better. And at this point, you are basically done your melting pixel effect. Congratulations, you guys made it. However, I'm gonna provide one quick tip just to make it look a little bit cooler and a little more eye-catching. Personally, I like putting a little bit of a glow in things that I'm working with glitch art or sci-fi, cyberpunk, that type of genre, because it gives this nice little kind of neon feeling to it. And how you can do that is by pre-comping this matte and this melting pixel layer together. Control-Shift-C to pre-compose. We're gonna call it melting pixel cutout. We're going to duplicate this. So now there are 2 of those layers, and then I'm going to pull up an effect called Deep Glow. Now I like putting this on literally everything because it gives physically accurate light fall off. Now if I hit this and then set to screen, now it's really glowy. I'll change the opacity to maybe 50, so it's a little bit less glowy. And if I play it through, right now it's at full resolution, so it's taking a little bit of time. But this is what you get, as opposed to this, which may look a little bit flat. Now let's say you've already bought the Pixel Sorter plugin and you don't want to pay for another plugin. You're thinking, Herman, why are you hurting my wallet? No worries, you can do something very similar by using the built-in glow effect in After Effects. So I'll delete this deep glow. Right now it's looking a little bit brighter because it's still a layer on top set to screen. We're gonna keep it that way. We're gonna pull up the glow effect, and then we're gonna play with the radius and also the threshold. And this will provide us with a bit of a soft look. And you can also play with the intensity. But in this case, I think keeping it at 1 is okay. So this may not look as glowy, but what you can do is duplicate this again, increase the radius like so, hit T, and then change the opacity so it's a little bit lower. And this essentially gives you a really nice effect as well. In this case, it almost actually looks the same. This is the effect that you are left with, guys. And once I added an extra little bit of graphics, this is what I ended up with. So that is it, guys. That is how you do the melting pixels from Glasses effect. And like I said before, this is only the tip of the iceberg on what you can do. This is just a little portion of the endless possibilities you can do with this plugin. So do consider it. I do believe that there is a trial period that you can use for the plugin. So you can try it out, see if it's a good fit for you before you actually follow through and make the purchase. Anyways, remember to subscribe to Josh Olufemii's YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Down below, there's a red subscribe button if you haven't done so already, so that you can check out some more tutorials from both him and myself. And be sure to check out my Instagram as well. It's @coffeeliquor. And that's it, guys. Until the next video, back to you, Josh.
Shout out to Herman, one of the awesome teachers that we have on the channel. Thanks so much for sharing your knowledge with us. And make sure to check out all the videos in this week's creative series. They can all be linked in the description below. And lastly, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And as always, remember to keep it chill.